Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavad Gita, as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Chapter 9, Text 11. Avajananti mang murha manushim tanumashritam param bhavam ajananto mama bhutamaheshwaram. Translation. Fools deride me when I descend in the human form. They do not know my transcendental nature as the Supreme Lord of all that be. So, purport. From the other explanations of the previous verses in this chapter, it is clear that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, although appearing like a human being, is not a common man. The Personality of Godhead, who conducts the creation, maintenance, and annihilation of the complete cosmic manifestation, cannot be a human being. Yet there are many foolish men who consider Krsna to be merely a powerful man and nothing more. Actually, he is the original Supreme Personality, as is confirmed in the Brahma Samhita. Ishvarah Parama Krsna. He is the Supreme Lord. There are many Ishvaras, controllers, and one appears greater than another. In the ordinary management of affairs in the material world, we find some official or director, and above him there is a secretary, and above him a minister, and above him a president. Each of them is a controller, but one is controlled by another. In the Brahma Samhita, it is said that Krsna is the supreme controller. There are many controllers, undoubtedly, both in the material and spiritual world, but Krsna is the supreme controller. Ishvarah Parama Krsna. And his body is Satchidananda, non-material. Material bodies cannot perform the wonderful acts described in previous verses. In previous verses, Krishna explains how he effects the creation and destruction of the material cosmos. Material bodies cannot perform the wonderful acts described in previous verses. His body is eternal, blissful, and full of knowledge. Although he is not a common man, the foolish deride him and consider him to be a man. His body is called here Manushim, because he is acting just like a man, a friend of Arjuna's, a politician involved in the battle of Kurukshetra. In so many ways he is acting just like an ordinary man, but actually his body is Satchidananda Vigraha, eternal bliss and knowledge absolute. This is confirmed in the Vedic language also. Satchidananda Rupaya Krishnaya. I offer my obeisances unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, who is the eternal blissful form of knowledge. Gopal Tapani, Upanishad. First verse. There are other descriptions in the Vedic language also. Tam ekam govindam. You are Govinda, the pleasure of the senses and the cows. Satchidananda vigraham. And your form is transcendental, full of knowledge, bliss, and eternality. Also from Gopal Tapani Upanishad. Despite the transcendental qualities of Lord Krishna's body, its full bliss and knowledge, there are many so-called scholars and commentators of Bhagavad Gita who deride Krishna as an ordinary man. The scholar may be born an extraordinary man due to his previous good work, but this conception of Sri Krishna is due to a poor fund of knowledge. Therefore he is called Murha. For only foolish persons consider Krishna to be an ordinary human being. The foolish consider Krishna an ordinary human being because they do not know the confidential activities of the Supreme Lord and his different energies. They do not know that Krishna's body is a symbol of complete knowledge and bliss, that he is the proprietor of everything that be, and that he can award liberation to anyone. Because they do not know that Krishna has so many transcendental qualifications, they deride him. Nor do they know that the appearance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in this material world is a manifestation of his internal energy. He is the master of the material energy, as has been explained in several places. Mama Maya Duratyaya. He claims that the material energy, although very powerful, is under his control, and whoever surrenders unto him can get out of the control of this material energy. If a soul surrendered to Krishna can get out of the influence of material energy, then how can the Supreme Lord, who conducts the creation, maintenance, and annihilation of the whole cosmic nature, have a material body like us? So, this conception of Krishna is complete foolishness. Foolish persons, however, cannot conceive that the personality of Godhead, Krishna, appearing just like an ordinary man, can be the controller of all the atoms and of the gigantic manifestation of the universal form. The biggest and the minutest are beyond their conception, so they cannot imagine that a form like that of a human being can simultaneously control the infinite and the minute. Although he is controlling the infinite and the finite, he is apart from all this manifestation. It is clearly stated concerning his Yogamaishvaram, his inconceivable transcendental energy, that he can control the infinite and the finite simultaneously, and that he can remain aloof from both of them, from them. Although the foolish cannot imagine how Krishna, who appears just like a human being, can control the infinite and the finite, those who are pure devotees accept this, for they know that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, they completely surrender unto him and engage in Krishna consciousness, devotional service of the Lord. There are many controversies between the impersonalists and the impersonalists about the Lord's appearance as a human being. But if we consult Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, the authoritative texts for understanding the science of Krishna, then we can understand that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is not an ordinary man, although he appeared on this earth as an ordinary human. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, first chapter, when the sages, headed by Shaunaka, inquired about the activities of Krishna, they said, Kritavan kila karmani saha ramena keshava atimartyani bhagavan gudha kapatamanushaha. Lord Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, along with Balaram, played like a human being, and so masked, he performed many superhuman acts. You know what that means, masked? Yeah, like having a mask covered with covered with a different appearance, so that people can't recognize you. It's good to have one word instead of having 15 words to explain it. The Lord's appearance as a man bewilders the foolish. No human being could perform the wonderful acts that Krishna performed while he was present on this earth. When Krishna appeared before his father and mother, Vasudeva and Devaki, he appeared with 4 hands. But after the prayers of the parents, he transformed himself into an ordinary child. As stated in the Bhagavatam, Babhuva prakrita shishuhu. He became just like an ordinary child, an ordinary human being. Now, here again it is indicated that the Lord's appearance as an ordinary human being is one of the features of his transcendental body. In the 11th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, also it is stated that Arjuna prayed to see Krishna's form of 4 hands, Tainaiva Rupena Chatur Bhujena. After revealing this form, Krishna, when petitioned by Arjuna, again assumed his original human-like form, Manusham Rupam. Yeah, form, not forms. These different features of the Supreme Lord are certainly not those of an ordinary human being. Some of those who deride Krishna and who are infected with the Mayavadi philosophy quote the following verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam to prove, or attempt to prove, that Krishna is just an ordinary man. Aham sarveshu bhuteshu bhutatma vastita sada. The Supreme is present in every living entity. We should better take note of this particular verse from the Vaishnava Acharyas like Jiva Goswami and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur instead of following the interpretation of unauthorized persons who deride Krishna. Jiva Goswami, commenting on this verse, says that Krishna, in his plenary expansion as Paramatma, is situated in the moving and the non-moving entities as the Supersoul. So any neophyte devotee who simply gives his attention to the Archa Murti, the form of the Supreme Lord in the temple, and does not respect the other living entities, is uselessly worshipping the form of the Lord in the temple. There are three kinds of devotees of the Lord, and the neophyte is in the lowest stage. The neophyte devotee gives more attention to the deity in the temple than to other devotees. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur warns that this sort of mentality should be corrected. A devotee should see that because Krishna is present in everyone's heart as Paramatma, every body is the embodiment or the temple of the Supreme Lord. So one offers respect to the temple of the Lord. As one offers respect to the temple of the Lord, he should similarly properly respect each and every body in which the Paramatma dwells. Everyone should therefore be given proper respect and should not be neglected. There are also many impersonalists who deride temple worship. They say that since God is everywhere, why should one restrict himself to temple worship? But if God is everywhere, is he not in the temple or in the deity? Although the personalist and the impersonalist will fight with one another perpetually, a perfect devotee in Krishna consciousness knows that although Krishna is the Supreme Personality, he is all-pervading as confirmed in the Brahma Samhita. Although his personal abode is Golok Vrindavan and he is always staying there by his different manifestations of energies and by his plenary expansion, he is present everywhere in all parts of the material and spiritual creation. Avajananti mamudhad manushintanamashtam parambhav majananto mamabhuta maheshvara. We are enjoined to always talk of Krishna and think about Krishna. Favorably, not unfavorably. One can also talk about Krishna and think about Krishna unfavorably. Here Krishna describes persons who think about Krishna, but not in a manner that is congenial to their own well-being or that of others. They have a different perspective on Krishna to the one he has of himself and the one that all pure devotees have. They see him quite differently. Different perspective. There is a popular but wrong theory that, well, you can think whatever you like and it's all the same. Joto mot toto pot. As many opinions, that many paths. However, Krishna, in his exposition here, in Bhagavad Gita, his exposition of reality, distinguishes right from wrong, what should be done and what should not be done. So what should be done is to think of Krishna favorably, to surrender to him. That should be done by the jivas. But there are persons who have a different perspective on Krishna. They don't think of Krishna favorably and they don't surrender to Krishna. Maybe they think Krishna should surrender to them. He needs to be trained by them in understanding what's what. So, these persons, they may criticize Krishna in various ways. We find the gold medal for criticism, or medal made out of what? Not out of gold, but anyway, the top criticizer of Krishna was Shishupal, who made a lifelong habit of criticizing Krishna. He started his life criticizing Krishna, and he finished his life criticizing Krishna. He got away with it 99 times, and on the 100th time, Krishna removed his head from his body, so he could no longer criticize Krishna. But we can see that his perspective on Krishna, in one sense, you could say it's correct, but it was with such a nasty outlook that when he was criticizing Krishna the last time, in the assembly of the Rajasuya sacrifice that Yudhishthira Maharaj was arranging, he criticized Krishna, saying that, who is this person? No one even knows what his status is in human society. First of all, he started off as a Vaishya, chasing after some cows. Now he's posing as a Kshatriya. So a person whose position is unknown in Vedic society means they're not civilized. It should be clear that one's either Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya or Shudra. If you don't fit in any of those categories, then you're just nowhere. You're antyaja, born outside the different categories, just uncivilized. Civilized life means to be in one of these four categories. Now, the Acharyas have commented, especially Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has noted, that Shishupal, actually what he said was correct, although his attitude wasn't correct. If we say that Krishna doesn't belong to, we can't understand who he is because he's not within any of the human categories, that's true. But it's not that Krishna is below the human categories as Shishupal thinks, but Krishna is above all human categories. He's not an ordinary human being. He's not even a human being at all. He's, as Srila Prabhupada quoted this verse, Atimartyani Bhagavan. He is literally superhuman. The same word is there in Sanskrit. Superhuman, or above superhuman actually means above the human level. He's Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So although Shishupal intended to criticize Krishna, he did criticize Krishna, but he saw the same thing but in a different perspective. The devotees see Krishna with love, and the non-devotees see Krishna with rancor. There are many cases in Brihad Bhagavatamrita. It's described that Padma, who was the mother of both Ugrasena and Kamsa, she had a very strange perspective on Krishna. And she would criticize. You see, he was abandoned by his parents, and then he was left with some cruel foster parents who forced him to go out and look after their cows, and out in the hot sun. They wouldn't even give him a pair of shoes. So what she said was, well, it's in one sense correct that Krishna went out looking after the cows. He liked to, though. And he went barefooted by his own desire. But according to Padma, he was pushed into this by force by his step-parents or foster parents. The step-parents are always, not always, but often there are many stories of cruel step-parents. They don't care for the child. So Padma thought, you see, he's actually Kshatriya from our noble race, but he was mistreated and made a servant of the Vaishyas. So it's the same, different people see the same thing, but they see it in a different way. Just like if you read the newspaper in America and read about what's going on in the American perspective on Syria, and if you read the newspaper in Iran, or Iranian newspaper, they're commenting on the same situation, but with a completely different perspective, due to where their sympathies lie. So in the same way, those who love Krishna, they see that everything that Krishna does is transcendental, beyond material contamination. But unfortunate persons who are suffering in this material world due to the results of their previous sinful activities, which are occasioned by the attitude of not accepting Krishna. Such persons, they think that, for instance, Krishna is an unfortunate person who's suffering in the material world due to his sinful activities. They'll say, you see, in a previous life he was a fish and a hog, a fish and a turtle, and then a hog, and then he got this genetically aberrant form of a half lion and a half man. Then he got born as a dwarf, and then just this extremely violent person. So they'll criticize Krishna in this way. That when he became Rama, well, he was trying to be good, but due to his past bad mentality, he unfairly had his brother deface Shurpanaka, and then he banished his wife, and then for a little time he tried to be good as Buddha, but then again he became a violent massacreist as Kalki, and in this way they'll criticize Krishna. Actually, even the gopis, they criticize Krishna similarly. The gopis in Vrindavan, they discuss that Krishna, we've heard from Paunamasi that it's not just that you're cruel to us in this life, but you're cruel in previous lives also. You were cruel to women as Rama by having Shurpanaka defaced, and then as Vamana, this Bali Maharaj, he was actually a very good king and he was behaving very honorably with him, but you completely mistreated him and humiliated him and arrested him. Of course, the gopis say that out of love, but the non-devotees, they say that in the way of criticism. And even now in India, you'll find people who say they're devotees of Rama, and they'll say, Rama is very good and your Krishna is not good. Of course, that may be occasioned by love also. So this criticism of Krishna could be taken could be extended. If you could write a whole life story of Krishna's unfortunate, from the material point of view, Krishna appears to be very unfortunate. At the very he was born in a prison. What kind of child gets born in a prison? It's like children of prisoners who are being punished. He's born in a prison, then by some luck he escaped. His parents abandoned him. He was separated from his parents throughout all his childhood, and then even though he was from very noble parentage, he didn't know about that. He thought he was just some cowherd boy. And even when he did get reunited with his parents, they couldn't really gel with each other very well, because his parents, they were standoffish from him, and he himself, he felt very bad because he hadn't been with his parents. So during his childhood, even though he should have been trained in the Kshatriya arts, he was forced into child labor, going out looking after the cows. So it's not you could say it's not surprising that after a traumatic start to his life, that he turned out to be such a bad personality due to his childhood traumas. So then even he got out of that situation in living in Vrindavan, not knowing who he was, but how he got out of it by killing his uncle. That's a very bad thing to do, isn't it? To kill your uncle. The Jarasandha criticized Krishna. You see, you're a killer of your own relatives, not considering that Kamsa had killed six of Krishna's brothers prior to that, and that Kamsa's main wish in life was to kill Krishna. So they only see one side, they don't see the whole thing. So Krishna, even though he was mistreated by the Vrajvasis, according to some, he developed such an intense attachment to them, illogically, that even though he got power, position and fame as a Kshatriya, he remained emotionally attached to these people, and therefore he could never be happy, even while he was living amidst fabulous opulence in Dwaraka, which is true. But to ascribe it to Krishna's misfortune, that's foolishness. So all the things that are said are true, but it's a matter of perspective. So he took on the role as a Kshatriya, but then the noble, respectable Kshatriyas, they wouldn't accept him. They said, "Oh, come on, you're just a cowherd. What do you know? You're just a cowherd boy. What are you doing? Calling yourself a Kshatriya?" Of course, the really noble Kshatriyas, like Yudhishthira, Bhishma, they fully accepted Krishna. But others, the whole world was divided at that time into the camps of the saintly Kshatriyas and the demoniac Kshatriyas. So demoniac Kshatriyas who thought themselves very noble and worthy, they criticized Krishna in this way. And in fact, if Krishna hadn't come, then they would have triumphed over the world. That's why Krishna came, being prayed for by Bhumi Devi, the earth, that she is overrun by these sinful demons in the guise of Kshatriyas. She wouldn't call them exactly Kshatriyas, because Kshatriyas shouldn't be such rascals. They should be real Kshatriya means pious person. So in this way they want to criticize Krishna, but they make a major mistake by not knowing that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Avajananti mang mudha manushim tanamashritam. They criticize Krishna because they think that he's a human, and they don't know param bhavam ajananto mama bhuta maheshwaram. They don't know his supreme nature, and that he is the controller of everything. They don't know that because Krishna comes to perform his lila, his transcendental, blissful pastimes. So they don't know that. They think, well, he's just one of us. He just wants to conquer over and enjoy, and he got all these women and he's enjoying, and they became very envious at that. That he has so many women to enjoy and so much opulence to enjoy. And so they simply tried to find fault with Krishna, not seeing that Krishna performed all kinds of activities that are impossible for an ordinary person. For instance, that Krishna single-handedly defeated the forces of Jarasandha 17 times. That's just one example. There are many, many examples. So it would have been much more intelligent for them to have, even if they didn't like Krishna, just to have at least as a political ploy to have taken shelter of Krishna. Because if they had taken shelter of Krishna, then they could have retained their kingdoms and as subordinate kings. Actually, Krishna himself, he didn't even take the kingship of the world. He arranged that for Yudhishthira Maharaj. But the other kings who were against Yudhishthira, they were envious of him also. They didn't want to accept Yudhishthira's overlordship. They may have participated in the Rajasuya Yagya, but they weren't happy at heart. They were under Yudhishthira as a political necessity, but they didn't like that. They wouldn't even like to be under Duryodhana or anyone, because that's the nature of demons. They don't like to be under anyone, no authority. Of course, for a Kshatriya, that is considered noble to be independent, but generally there are levels of Kshatriyas. There's one Samrat, who's the emperor. It means an emperor. It means all king. Sam means all, and Raj, coming from Raja, means the king of everything. And then there are subordinate kings who have smaller kingdoms under him. So they took Krishna to be an ordinary person, one of them, and therefore they ascribed all these activities of Krishna to be the results of some previous impious activities and some wicked outlook, not knowing that everything Krishna does, says, thinks, desires, everything is completely pure. Ananda Chinmaya Rasa. Krishna's activities are not like those of ordinary conditioned souls. They are always on the completely pure and spiritual platform. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada twice in this purport quotes Ishvara Parama Krishna. It should be understood that He is the Supreme Lord, and His activities, they are atimartya. They're on the superhuman platform, supernatural platform, above the platform of persons who are subject to death. So, different people see with different perspectives everything. And when one does not adopt the perspective about Krishna that Krishna himself describes here in Bhagavad Gita, then he becomes a demon. So this whole idea that, well, everyone's entitled to their own perspective and all views are as good as each other, this is not supported in Bhagavad Gita, nor does it jive with reality. And just like in America, if you go around preaching the perspective about America that's promoted by the Iranian government, you have a good chance of getting beaten up or shot, if not imprisoned. And vice versa. In Iran, if you go around talking the perspective, what the American outlook on the Iranian government, then you'll get in a lot of trouble. So it's the same. Everyone has access to the same information. Well, actually, that's not even true, because the press they suppress certain information, promote lies, emphasize some things over others. But even given the same general information, there are completely different outlooks on it. And it's everywhere. Israel also, there are the extreme right-wing Zionists who think that we have to occupy all this land, otherwise the Messiah won't come. And there are Christians who support that. Yes, we have to support. There are others who say human rights. They can't just take over this land. So, because the same scenario, but because people have a different perspective on it, they see it completely different. Srila Prabhupada quotes from that Yamuna Acharya Stotra Ratna. It's a very nice verse which I'm going to read because I don't fully remember it. Tvam Shila Rupa Charitai Parama Prakrishtai Sadvena Sadvikataya Prabalaischa Shastrai Prakyata Daiva Paramarta Vidang Mataischa Naivasura Prakritaya Prabhavanti Bodham. Yamuna Acharya praying to Krishna, Tvam, you, he says, you, in a familiar way. Your Shila, your character. Rupa, your form, your beauty. Charita, your activities and your character. Parama Prakrishtai, they're the best of the best. Super. And your very existence at the summit of goodness is strongly proclaimed in all the Shastras. But persons who are of the nature of demons, they cannot understand you. Even though it's your character being completely pure and the best of all, that's loudly declared by the Shastras, by the persons. This is also the opinion of persons who are in full knowledge of the spiritual topmost goal of life. But those who are demons, they cannot know Krishna. So even though they may study Krishna and make so many theories and theses, they cannot know Krishna. They may get all their facts right in one sense, but they get their interpretation completely wrong. So we should hear about Krishna from devotees, not from non-devotees. Avaishnava mokhod girnam putam harikatamritam shravana naiva kartavya sarpo chishtam yatha paya. Drinking milk. If we drink milk, we become nourished. But if we drink milk that's been touched by the lips of a poisonous snake, then whatever's left over, that same milk, it looks the same, it may taste the same, but instead of nourishing us, it will poison us. So we should not hear about, in the same way we should not hear about Krishna from non-devotees. It's very dangerous. It may seem to be the same thing. It may even seem to be very tasty and nice, but the result is that our consciousness will become poisoned. So we have to hear about Krishna from the Mahatmas in 2 verses. From this one, Krishna will describe the Mahatmas. And there, in verse after that, what is the Mahatma? Satatam kirtayantoma. They're all, the first characteristic of the Mahatmas is that they're always glorifying Krishna. So I may say, well, the demons like Shishupal, they talk about Krishna too. That's not exactly kirtan. It's called apakirtan, or they're declaring about Krishna, but in the wrong way. So we shouldn't hear from such murhas, fools and rascals. We should hear from devotees about Krishna, those who love Krishna. That will inspire love for Krishna within our hearts. Bhaktya sanjataya bhaktya. From bhakti comes bhakti. And bhakti is with the devotees. So, Bhaktistu bhagavad bhakta sangena parijayate. Bhakti comes from association with devotees. So we should hear about Krishna from devotees, not from non-devotees. They may get everything right, have all the information right, but their perspective is completely wrong. Hare Krishna. Any question about this? Yeah.
How is it that the holy name should also not be listened from?
The holy name should also not be heard from non-devotees.
How can, if it's just the holy name, how can this be?
Just the holy name. Just the holy name. The holy name is not some measurable product. The holy name is Krishna, and He manifests Himself as He pleases. In the hearts of the devotees, on the tongue of the devotees, He manifests Himself. Non-devotees, they may say the name of Krishna, but that, because they're specifically envious of Krishna, while vibrating the name Krishna, they manifest their hatred of Krishna. So that's not good to hear, not to be affected by. We should not expose ourselves to hearing from non-devotees, as has become popular in ISKCON today, hearing from the so-called Krishnadas, demon. Send him an email, Bhakti-Vikas Swami called you a demon. Again. He sings nicely, I presume. That's why he's popular. I never heard his singing. I didn't subject myself to that. As Sanatana Goswami warns us not to. And Prabhupada quotes that so many times. So I didn't hear from him. We should not hear from him. Become rascals like him. Exactly this description which Krishna gives here, exactly he has that outlook. It's published in a book which is circulating within ISKCON. Trojan Horse. He says that, well, when I think of Krishna, I don't think of any blue boy or anything like that, or any god, but I think of the I can't remember exactly, typical Mayavad rascaldom is this. The reality that is all of us. So don't hear. There's an example to bring from the general to the specific. Anything else?
Krishna says from time to time he appears. He descends in this time when he descended. Treta Yuga and Dwapara Yuga was changed in Sri Lanka. This kind of what does it mean? What has changed in this last?
I don't know. I don't understand it, to tell you the truth. There was an overlapping of the yugas. Did anyone work that out? What that means? I don't understand it. It's the kind of thing we should have asked Gopi Paranidhana Prabhu, but he's passed away now. Overlapping is always there. Overlapping of yugas. It means that just like every morning and evening there's an overlapping of day and night. It's called sandhya. Means the intermediate time between day and night. So there's a sandhya of yugas also. So that's always there between yugas. But that gives the idea that Dwapara came before Treta or something like that, but I don't understand it. It doesn't seem to be either, because it's always stated that Krishna appeared in Dwapara Yuga. So, sorry. Can't help you with that one. Oh, you want to say something about that? Okay, then what's your question?
What's the best way to preach to people we see just once?
What's the best way we can preach to people we see just once? Well, the best way is to tell them to give up all their nonsense and completely surrender to Krishna. But that is not generally the policy of our acharyas to do that. Although Srila Prabhupada, I was personally present once when he was asked about how to preach to non-devotees, and he quoted this verse from Prabodhananda Saraswati. This, what is that? Hey sadhava sakala vihaya chaitanya chandra charane kurutanuraga. That's the last line of it. I can't remember the first line. Anyway, the purport is that Srila Prabhupada said, you should go to a person and flatter them. You are such a great personality. And then he will say, oh, he's understood. So what do you want? He said, what do you want from me? You're flattering me, what do you want from me? So you kindly give up all your hogwash nonsense ideas and surrender at the lotus feet of Chaitanya Chandra. So that's the best thing, but not everyone's, we have to assess also as best we can, or we can try to understand what is their present situation so that we can at least help them on the way. So generally Srila Prabhupada has recommended the widespread distribution of his books. We can chant the holy name so that people can hear that, distribute prasadam, have festivals. These are all activities meant to bring people to Krishna consciousness with the understanding that not many people will come immediately, so they need help along the way. So the best way, exactly, well, that may be different in different cases. Of course, Srila Prabhupada said that the best way to preach is to distribute my books. That's also. Doesn't mean it's the only way. There are various ways. Preach basically means to give the message of Krishna to others. So that may be given verbally, may be given in the form of books, or we might even, without giving books or actually speaking the message, we may arrange some, or just like going on Harinam Sankirtan. Of course, that should be accompanied by book distribution, but people can hear the name of Krishna. Then, you were going to say something?
Sometimes new devotees who are trying to practice devotional service and they read books of Srila Prabhupada, when they read Krishna book, they have a problem that Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan, they seem to them like kind of fairy tales or like children's stories. Or
Have you had that experience that devotees read Krishna? You've heard two people read Krishna's pastimes. They're becoming devotees and they think it's like fairy stories.
Different demons in different animal forms.
Different demons in different animal forms sound like fairy stories. No, the fairy stories sound like Krishna's pastimes. They got it round the wrong way. I didn't have any problem. The first book that I read was Krishna book, actually. It was volume 2. It started, it was volume 2 of a trilogy. And the first pastime was there, was the chapter of killing Vyomasura. Sorry, Keshi and Vyomasura in one chapter. I didn't have any problem at all with it because prior to that I'd read many folk stories from all over the world, and it just struck me that they're only stories, and we're told that fairies, goblins, elves, gremlins, trolls, leprechauns, dragons, and so on don't exist, but it seems that at least they used to exist. And at that time in Ireland, there was still leprechaun sighting was quite common. Now Ireland's, I was just in Ireland and I asked, does anyone see leprechauns? And they were, yeah, they're still seen. So it just struck me that that what we're taught in the schools and what we're led to believe, they're deliberately misleading us that all these things don't exist, but they probably do exist. That's what I thought. And also there are ghost stories from all over the world, since time immemorial, from all different kinds of cultures, which some of them have no connection with each other. So it just struck me that they're probably ghosts also. And so I didn't have any problem reading Krishna's path. It just struck me that there are many just this going to work with a pinstripe suit as his typical old British businessman dress. Pinstripe suit, a brolly, which means an umbrella, and a bowler hat. These are I used to see the people going to work every morning, going past my father's house, going down to the station to get the train into London. So they want to think that this is life, just living in a house in some city like London or Munich, and everything is very straightforward, and there's what the scientists tell us, that's all true, and there's no soul, there's no God, there are no fairies, there's no ghosts, and there are no dragons. I thought, there's a bunch of rubbish. I don't believe them. So I had no problem accepting. They think Krishna's pastimes are like fairy stories, and they think that what they're taught in school is true. That's their disease. This mechanistic, reductionist view of the universe. Just, we are a bunch of chemicals, and life is good if you eat McDonald's hamburgers and drink Coca-Cola. And that's it. And you can take your choice of watching football or going skiing, and that's it. There's nothing. You're born and you die. Well, by Krishna's mercy, I had enough good sense to understand that I didn't have it so formulated as afterward when I heard Srila Prabhupada, but I understood they're not teaching us the truth. Of course it wasn't just me. I remember seeing in a hippie newspaper this photo of a fairy. They didn't have Photoshop in those days. It might have been possible with extremely sophisticated equipment of that time to be able to do that. But there are plenty of people the whole hippie generation, it was a rejection of the straightforward materialistic outlook. So you can tell them, you don't believe in fairy stories. Well, you think Krishna's pastimes are like fairy stories. Well, the fairy stories are maybe true. So if they're like fairy stories, well, what's wrong with that? Transcendental fairy stories. Well, what are they? You don't believe in demons. You can see them also. Not recommended, but there are plenty of people who they go down to lower astral planes by intoxication. As was also common in our generation, taking psychotropic drugs, which opened up your astral vision, generally going down to the lower astral levels, so you can see all these nasty things, nasty creatures. Most people who get into black magic in the Western world, or many of them, they come out of it because they find there's something real there, and it's very dangerous and bad. I remember my father used to read books by one author. What's his name? He wrote novels about black magic, and I also sometimes used to read them. What was his name? Dennis? A famous English author. Story after story about black magic, novels. So in the front of the book, in the beginning, he put a warning at every book. He said that he warns people that I'm writing about this, but don't get involved in it because there's something very real and very dangerous there. So, that doesn't tally with what we're taught at school. That there was a big bang, and then everything fell into place, and here we all are. We're just bunches of chemicals. Yeah.
In second program, they sometimes have it's the different big numbers of cows and servants.
Oh yeah.
Living,
millions of cows. Yeah, about millions of cows given away in charity daily. Again, I didn't have a problem when I first read that, and I don't, because why do we judge everything in terms of our experience on this tiny little planet, in this little blip of time, with our extremely limited intelligence? Why should everything be according to what we think it should be? The tallest person we ever saw was maybe what? Little taller than you. Maybe 2 meters or 2 and a bit. How tall are you?
Without 2 centimeters.
Yeah. So 2 and a bit meters. So, and then we hear descriptions of people who are, Lord Shiva sits under a banyan tree, which is how many? 1 billion yojanas in extent. Okay. The ants, they can't imagine what, the ant may be crawling on a human body, but he can't imagine how massive is the human body, because he judges everything. Atmavan manyate jagat. He measures everything according to his relative perspective. He's a big ant. He's the biggest, toughest ant in the whole of the ant's nest, and he's the greatest ant. You can't imagine humans. I mean, we have difficulty even. Can you imagine a polar bear? A polar bear, one ordinary full-grown polar bear would probably take up half this room size. Can you imagine that? Difficult to imagine, even a relatively small. A walrus would take up practically the whole room, maybe more. Plenty of whales which are bigger than this room, but it's difficult for us to imagine because we just think of, well, this is the size. Humans are somewhere between 1.5 and 2 meters. And that's it. And anything bigger than that, we start to think, how can that be? And we hear in Shastra of Timingala. Timi means whale, and Timingala means one creature that swallows whale. They swallow whales. How about that?
I have met one man. He was working in science, and he is very. He likes to read our books, and he's interested about Vedic knowledge and like that. And I asked him if it is not difficult for him to accept all these things when he is scientist. All these things which appear extraordinary.
All these things which appear extraordinary. How can a scientist accept them? You asked a scientist.
And he said, actually, opposite is true. For me, it's easy to accept all these things, because when you go deeper and deeper in science, then you realize that everything is possible. Like that.
That's interesting. A scientist who read Prabhupada's books told you that when you go deeper and deeper in science, you realize that anything is possible. That's definitely there in quantum theory. It's been 80 years or so since anything's possible. Now they're talking about multiverses. The theory of multiverse has come up. You know what that is? They say, well, there's not one universe, there are millions of universes. But that theory came up, you know why? To justify Big Bang and evolution theory. Because they think, well, this universe is so fine-tuned, how is it possible that everything's just exactly right for life to appear in it? There are about 20 scientific constants which just have to be exactly right down to the 1,000th decimal point. They're Planck's constant and the weak force and the gravity and speed of light and all these. Unless they're all exactly right, we can't have life as we know it. And the intelligent design people say, well, that shows that someone's fine-tuned it. And they say, no, there must be zillions of universes, and this is the one in which there are billions and zillions of chances, and this is the one in which everything's just right. So, and their theory is that in all these other universes, the laws of physics are different. And then you have in the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum theory, which is the generally accepted interpretation, that for every event, apart from the result that we see, there could be unlimited other events which follow on from that. I mean, that's really weird. That's much more weird than Krishna killing demons. So there are all kinds of universes being generated all over the place which we can't see, and which I had €2 in my pocket, and I could have either bought some cigarettes or given it to a beggar. I decided to buy the cigarettes. In another universe, I decided to give it to the beggar. And then the whole of it's just insane. And then the whole universe goes on differently. But then there are unlimited things going on, so there are infinite times infinite number of universes being generated. That's what I understand. I mean, I haven't gone deeply into it, but that's weird. So, if you get deeply into science, then this whole idea that science very precisely explains everything, that broke down actually almost 100 years ago now. But they still teach it as this, yes, well, according to science, this is this and that is that, and we understand everything. But they themselves have been completely bewildered for almost a century now, since this quantum theory came up, and they kind of did. I mean, I wouldn't say completely bewildered, because they do things with it. But explaining it and understanding it is just too weird. So Krishna killing demons, why not? Anything's possible. See, there you go. You should quote it. You should make an interview with that scientist and publish it in your magazine.
Unlimited infinite chances itself is a big fairy tale.
Unlimited chances, infinite.
Unlimited infinite chances. Billions of itself is a big fairy tale. This is just a big fairy tale itself.
Well, that's another point. It's just their theory. I mean, they make up all these theories. They have one theory, and when they find it doesn't fit, then they make up another theory to bolster it up. And it goes on and on and on like this. There are certain symptoms of, and we're getting off on a different topic, pseudoscience. What they call pseudoscience is, one thing is that it's not demonstrable. If there's some so-called scientific theory which is not demonstrable, then they call it pseudoscience. That's one of the symptoms. One of them is, then just demonstrate life coming into being from matter. Just demonstrate a universe coming into being from nothing. It's not demonstrable. So according to their own definition, it's all pseudoscience. I didn't try that one on a scientist yet. Okay, Hare Krishna. All glories to His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada.